The Saints have made their first major move before the trade deadline, shipping Rashid Shaeed to the Seattle Seahawks. We'll talk about this move, why it had to be made, but why it's also a pretty tough blow to this offense right here on the Straight Up Saints podcast.
You're listening to the Straight Up Saints podcast.
What is up, Who Dat Nation? Welcome inside another edition of the Straight Up Saints podcast. I'm your host, Chris Rosevogel, and as always, the Straight Up Saints podcast is brought to you by Scott McNair Injury Lawyers. The Saints making their first big move before the deadline. They're getting rid of Rashid Shaeed. He's going to the Seattle Seahawks. Compensation hasn't been announced yet. Maybe it'll be announced while we're recording right now. But look, this is one of the players that the Saints had to consider moving. If you're going to keep Olave long-term, then it definitely makes sense to get rid of Shaheed. If you weren't sure about Olave, but you know you weren't going to pay Rashid Shaeed long-term, get rid of him now. I know people are going to bring up the comp pick formula. My argument against the comp pick formula is if the Saints were to just wait and lose Shaheed in the offseason, this team is deprived of talent. I think it makes more sense to go get a pick for next year's draft and not have to worry about the way you're spending in free agency, because the Saints are going to need help at running back. They're going to need help at linebacker, at defensive line, maybe at corner. So you can be a little aggressive in free agency without having to worry about what comp pick you'll get back for losing Rashid Shaeed. You get another draft asset this year. So for that reason, I like them being aggressive now and getting rid of Rashid Shaeed. Now, it still stinks, right? Like, Shaheed is an exciting player for this team, and the fact that he went from an undrafted rookie to being a dynamic playmaker for the Saints and has managed to have success with pretty much three different offensive play callers is pretty impressive, because he's been here, for the early stages with Pete Carmichael, obviously with Clint Kubiak, who he's going to reunite with now in Seattle, and also with Kellen Moore. So I got nothing but respect for Rashid Shaeed. The development of his career has been great to watch. He went from a guy that just seemed like an elite return man to a legitimate playmaker at the wide receiver position. But like I said, when you're rebuilding, tough decisions have to be made. And to be quite honest, I really hope this isn't the only player the Saints trade today, because I think this team needs to accumulate as many picks as possible. And, by doing so and getting rid of, let's say, Carl Granderson or Pete Werner, in addition to a guy like Shaheed, you replenish your draft capital, which, again, don't understand why they got rid of 2 picks for Devon Vele. But I think this is where the Saints are at right now. At 1-8, you're not going anywhere. It's all about the future and making sure that you could stockpile potential young assets. And the only way to do that is by trading a couple of guys that are at least appealing to other teams. Shaheed, no doubt about it. You trade him to Seattle. Now he joins JSN in that wide receiver room, and that's a team that's contending right now. I think that makes a ton of sense. So we'll see what happens. Added bonus to this trade, by the way, you got to play Vele now, right? I mean, he hasn't been on the field. It's been a big complaint for us Saints fans about that because you traded 2 picks for him. Why isn't he out there? What's the point of moving those picks if you're not going to utilize him? Now I think you got to see him out there. Does it change the offense at all? I'm not quite sure yet. We'll kind of see how that factors into it. I mean, who knows? Maybe Saints also trade Brandon Cooks before the trade deadline is up. But that's a thought that's kind of running through my head right now as well. As a trade like this gets made, you think about Vele and maybe his usage goes up. You also think about Olave, right? Is an extension in the works for Chris Olave? I think that's something to also consider. I've said before on that front, the Saints don't have a lot of young talent. He fits the bill of that. If they genuinely feel comfortable with him health-wise and they can get to a number that's fair for both parties, then yeah, I'd be cool with them bringing him back for 2027 and beyond. Obviously, he's under contract for 2026. But the first guy out right now is Rashid Shaeed. He's going to Seattle in the immediate future. There's no doubt about it. A 1-8 Saints team just got worse. At the end of the day, though, they weren't doing anything this year. Got to think about the future seasons, 2026 and beyond. Got to get some picks. So return hasn't been announced yet on the trade. Jakobi Meyers did get traded for a 4th and a 6th, so maybe the Saints got close to that. If so, all right, great. If not, either way, Saints have more digging to do in terms of getting rid of some of their assets. So I'd be on the lookout for Pete Werner, Carl Granderson, maybe Alante Taylor, and we'll go from there. Actually, compensation just broke in. So we're going to finish on this. I'll read the compensation, and then we'll get out of here. The Saints are receiving 4th and 5th round picks in 2026 for Shaheed. Okay, so in my opinion, that's actually a pretty good deal. It's better than the Jakobi Meyers deal, which makes sense. I think Shaheed is just a more explosive playmaker, and he knows what system he's going into with Clint Kubiak. So 4th and 5th, remember, you got rid of a 4th and a 7 for Vele. So if you want to look at it this way, all right, cross out the 4th, although the Saints pick is much higher. It's kind of like a 5th and Vele for a 7th, if you want to look at it that way. if you really want to. But 4th and 5th for Rashid Shaeed. We'll see if the Saints make any other moves. If they do, we'll cover it right here on the Straight Up Saints podcast, the destination for the Who Dat Nation.